Hey everybody, welcome to the In All Things podcast. It's time to see God in everything. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to season 6 of the In All Things podcast. As usual, I'm joined by
Me.
Steve and Jared. I looked
That's
the
cool.
wrong ways for today. And my name is Mitch Frost, as usual. So,
As usual.
yep. Sometimes it changes, but usually that's
What else
my
do
name.
they call you?
I'm not going to say that with a live mic in front of my face. So I
Okay.
got a lot of names out
All right.
there.
That's true.
Things that they've called me in my day.
yeah.
So,
It's a little embarrassing too.
yeah. So anyway, we're here.
A
And
little frosty.
That was
That's
a
okay.
name for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a big frosty?
There's a vanilla frosty.
I know, but is there
Is
a big frosty
My dad, I guess.
if he had a
or chocolate frosty?
if he had a Twitter
Or somebody
handle.
really likes Christmas peppermint frosty?
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm just,
Right.
you said
Well-
it. You said it, not me.
It's true. Well, here we are, and we're not talking about that today.
No.
But we are going to spend some time talking about money.
Yeah.
So we might as well just get right into it today.
Wait, I have a question
Okay, go for it.
about last week's podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
Have you guys thought any more about your answers to any of our stuff, or like spiritual development wise, before we move on?
Like
Because
which part? I'm trying
any
to
of
remember
it.
some of the big things that
Any
we...
of it.
Mm.
Just because, so
You have apparently.
just one little minor thing. I find that I am developed spiritually when I experience the Lord in new, refreshing ways. For instance, through nature and creation specifically. I was thinking about how I'm going on a trip next week to Montana, ski trip, and one of the most fulfilling parts of those trips is not skiing or being with friends. It's just like experiencing nature. And I feel like I am enriched and renewed and restored by the Spirit in those times. And I feel like that's like an underrated part of my spiritual development. Like I seek those out purposefully because, yeah. Anyway, I don't know if
No,
you
I
guys
think
are-
that's really, really good. When you're going skiing, I'm going to a pastor's meeting in Florida, and I just heard on the radio this morning. Now that we're in February, January in Central Ohio, it on average over the last 46 years, they said there's 3 different qualifications of the weather, or the way they categorize it: partly sunny, partly cloudy, or mostly cloudy. We average in January 4 partly sunny days.
Today's one of them. Then.
And
that's not
this is
January.
February. And 7, we have 7 most are partly cloudy, and then 18 or whatever mostly cloudy days. That's normal. They said for the month of January in 2024, we had 0 mostly sunny days. The sun
believe it.
just peaked
Yeah.
out
I
a
haven't
little
seen the
bit.
sun in a long time.
It's so we walk in. It's February 1st when we're recording, and it is sunny this morning. So
weird.
Does that change your mood?
It's nice.
A little bit.
It does.
But it'll change your mood even more if you can get out in it and
Yes.
soak the sunshine up, right?
Even
But
if it's
too
35
cold.
degrees and sunny,
Yeah.
it feels so much better than the cloud cover here.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, there's
Yeah.
definitely mental side effects that come
There
with
are.
not ever seeing the sun.
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's it's vitamin deficiency. It really is. So, and you can.
But
feel
it is. I don't know why it feels like a spiritual thing too. It's like a reminder of, I don't know, of God created the sun.
Yeah,
and-
but if you think about that, if we're inside, if we lock ourselves inside all day, every day, and never get outside, that has a serious effect on your mood.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though people like Mitch claim to be allergic to the sun.
Oh, because I sneeze? That is true.
and
yeah,
what is that?
I'm allergic
What is
to
that called?
It is a Chew syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I sneeze 2 or 3 times every time I see the sun.
But only initially, right? It doesn't just keep going.
Just keep going.
just keep on sneezing.
And
for hours.
I know a couple people with this as well, so I'm not alone in my fight and my struggle.
Okay.
I'm seen and heard and loved.
I'm firsthand witness to it. So,
Yeah, it's true. It's
I've
a
seen
fact.
it happen. I don't think you're
But I
exaggerating.
love the sun, even though it makes
Yeah.
me sneeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, there's really is something to the general revelation of God that if you don't ever experience that, I feel like that it's just a piece of your spiritual development that you're missing, because being able to witness and experience firsthand the glory of God, like with your own eyes, is huge. So, yeah. But anyway, I just thought of that. I've been thinking about the last couple of days, like the different ways in which, the Spirit works in me, rather than just like, through Scripture or through other people. So
I feel like that's one I take for granted often, nature and things like that. But then I'll go to like the beach, or I'll go to, for me, the few times I've been around like real mountains, and I just have these big like come to Jesus moments of just seeing how amazing his creation is. And then that'll make me appreciate just the normal like sunshine or just like tree, whatever, for like a couple weeks. And then I'm like, man, I want to, I kind of just forget about it and take it for granted because it's just normal. Yeah. And then I'll have another experience. Like I've never been to Montana, but I'll go somewhere like that. And then I'm just like, man, creation's so cool, We'll
be on the top like of the mountain. Like it happens every single year. Me and my friend Mike will be sitting at the ski lift or something. We'll get the very top of the mountain, and he'll always bring it up. He'll say like, how the heck could anybody ever deny God? When you look out like and just see for miles and it makes you feel so small and insignificant, because just how big the mountains are and around you. But anyway, I just wanted to bring it up.
Along these similar lines, for me, coming up on a year of having a baby, that's one thing that I've had a lot of similar moments of.
Oh, for sure.
How could anybody ever deny that there is something bigger than us going on here? Just watching her develop and become a person, over this past year, that's pretty crazy too. So I've had a lot of those kind of moments just in my own home, sitting in the basement playing with her or whatever. And I'll just have these moments of like, how in the world do people not believe that there's a God who, designed all this? It's just crazy. But
yeah, that's both what you said. And I wasn't thinking about this coming in, but I think we really focused on our personal spiritual development last week. But I do think a big part of our personal is it's small groups, it's who we're around. And I get so much energy from those conversations with people, and learn so much from having myself around the right people. And those are energizing, and I can look back at big steps in my spiritual growth, and they all relate to almost always not just something out there on my own solo, but it was with people. Like you said, Mitch, doing the shred, that would have been difficult to do without people, and you need that. And so that's such a big part of it. That's why we talk about it all the time. So.
Do you ever find that along those lines, do you ever find that like people, that the Lord can speak to you through even people who aren't saved, or like, do you ever have those experiences where you're like just around somebody and you feel like the Lord is either telling you to do something, or something that somebody says to you is an indirect, way that the Lord is trying to like slap you?
What either affirms what you believe more, or makes you question it a little bit, to the point that you do a little bit more research to be able to understand what you believe a little bit better. It drives you deeper, it drives you closer to God. When you're challenged by other people.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
My tattoo artist is like this. He's not atheist. He's, agnostic. I guess he believes like that there's some spiritual being out there. He believes there's a God, but he doesn't believe in the whole, salvation through Jesus thing. And I love talking to him because it challenges me, because he brings up these points that I'm like, oh man, like that's such a good, like I really need to figure out how to answer this question. So, next time I go back to him, I can be like, hey, listen, I thought a lot about what you said, about what you were asking, and your concerns, and here's my, and then, he'll always have some, rebuttal to, but yeah. So, and I think it's interesting, because a lot of times we'll be like, oh man, like I grow so much spiritually in small group or in church when I'm around Christians, but like, what about other people? And I think that there's some validity there.
Yeah, I've had a similar situation recently with somebody that I've had to do some meetings with, and is kind of coaching me through some stuff. And this person is very much not in church, doesn't believe in things that I believe in. And we've had some conversations about where we stand just differently about, worldviews and different kind of things. And it's so interesting, because working at a church, being on church staff, you just don't get to maybe interact with people like that on a day-to-day basis. And so it's cool, and it's challenging just to hear different perspectives. And I feel like it pushes me deeper and helps me grow and think about, how do people that weren't raised in church view the things that we talk about all the time, and it is really different. And the more time you spend with people like that, having conversations like that, you're like, oh, I actually understand where they're coming from, and I know how to approach it, maybe, which I think is super cool. But
it's really easy to to be affirmed in your faith when you're around people that believe all the same thing. But when you're put on the spotlight, that's when your faith is really challenged, and when you're when you really need the Spirit's guidance. So,
and it is a challenge for us working in ministry. We have to find it. I remember when I was, youth pastor, when I was in Mitch's stage of the game, I had been in a Christian school, grew up, when I got saved at 10, my parents put us in a Christian school, went to a Christian college. Then I'm working for a church. I just didn't have people in my life like that. They were not believers hardly at all. So I am so thankful for all those opportunities I've had. And a key thing has been with my kids playing sports, just getting to be friends and have relationships with people who are not in church or not saved, and being friends with them and learning how they view the world and respecting that, but also refining my views and the way I interact and the way I think about things. Because we've used that whole term echo chamber before. We've easily found ourselves living in that. But anyway, the topic I think we're going to talk about today is another one of those where what we believe, what the Bible teaches, is contrary to what the world teaches or believes when it comes to the issue of money and how we view money. Very different. There's, Scripture says so much about money. And the reason we decided to pick this topic has a lot to do with that we're doing a 3-week series in church on it. So we thought it'd be good to do something that kind of complements it and maybe talk a little bit about our background on this. And I know I have the most because of age, but just how we grew up viewing it. I thought it was interesting to ask this question because I was one of those kids that didn't get one, but a lot of my friends got an allowance, a weekly amount from their parents, and usually certain chores were expected, and you just got this money at the end of the week. But my parents were like, we're not doing that. But it was kind of like I could get paid for doing certain things above and beyond, like maybe, I don't know, mowing the grass or stacking wood for the wood stove or different things like that. My parents would say, here's, $10 or whatever it would be for that. So I was curious, did you guys grow up with an allowance or any type of, no?
Nope.
No.
I didn't get paid for anything.
Nothing?
Nope. No jobs that I did, cutting the grass,
If you wanted something like
stacking wood, whatever, that was just like expected part of what we had to do.
Right.
The younger, like when I was younger and didn't have a job, right? If I needed money to go out somewhere or do something, I would just ask, hey, my friend wants to go to a movie, whatever, can I have $20? And my parents would be like, yeah. But it was not like, oh, you did this, you get this much money. It was kind of just like, no, that's expected. You live in our house, and that's kind of how we do it. And then as soon as I could, it was expected that I got a job, and then anything that I wanted to do or I wanted to spend money on, I could because it was my money. So at like 16, I started working at Grapevine Pizza and just started making my own money. And then it was like I never really asked my parents. And also, too, they were paying for travel sports and all the other things that happen when, kids grow up. So, but in terms of allowance and money for chores, I never had anything like that.
And same for you?
No, I got allowance. What a blessing.
How much was it? Do you remember?
I don't know. I think it went up with age.
Sure.
I think it was like 10, you got $10 or something like that.
But it was certain things required or just?
Expectations for sure around the house. But the main thing that I remember about getting allowance as a kid was being frustrated with, like, my dad trying to teach us money skills, like from the time we were like 5 years old. And I would have to take that money and separate it into different categories every week. So like had a jar for long-term savings, a jar for like short-term savings, a jar for cash, and then one jar for tithing money. And like by the time if I'm like 8 years old, by the time you divide that into 4 different categories, you're like, oh man, I remember like, oh man, there's nothing in here, And then as a kid, like the last thing you want to do as a kid is give a bunch of it to the church, right? But like my parents very conservative in their upbringing, and so they brought us up the same way, and it's just, it's interesting. Like we make our kids do that now, and I know that they have the same thoughts that we had as kids, but the goal eventually is that they'll understand. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it was just a regular thing every week. And I assume there were times where like, if I was bad or didn't do something, my parents wouldn't give us allowance.
Right.
I don't know.
So what was your first real job? He talked about Grapevine Pizza.
My first real job, I bagged groceries at grocery store.
Okay.
And I think that was even before I could drive, I think my parents would like drop me off there and I would do that for a few hours after school. But yeah. And it was like, I think I got paid, I don't know, like basically nothing, but that was when like at grocery stores, you would bag groceries and then like you would walk the groceries out to their car and hope they would tip you.
Oh, right.
You know that?
Yeah, I remember
those
that.
days?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that was the original tipping culture. Now it's like, and now I don't think nobody does that.
No. Well, they can do Instacart, so they have them brought out to their car. But yeah. So that's what my first was. Roy Rogers. You ever heard of that? It was like fast food, like Hardee's. It was kind of they had roast beef sandwiches, and I hated.
You cook?
No, I was frontline. I was a cashier.
Of course you were.
Of course,
had that pretty face out front.
Oh, one time I did the back, and I was like, I'm not doing this. Like making fried chicken.
Are you too good for that?
I was like, I don't want to do this. It didn't last long. But so when you got money, like Mitch, you were saying, like, did you feel like you just were good at managing it, or do you feel like you just spent it unwisely as a teenager?
The older I got, like really junior and senior year, I got pretty good at setting a good bit of it aside because I worked a lot, and it was like I couldn't spend that. I mean, you could, but like I was making a good amount of money in high school that I wasn't just like immediately spending it all. I mean, both my parents, the way I was raised, my dad's pretty frugal, and that was just kind of the environment that we grew up in. Was like you spent money when you had to. Occasionally you would if you wanted to, but it was pretty like, there's going to be dinner at home. There's going to be things happening at home. Like you don't need to just go spend money. So I kind of maybe, the whole saying of like caught, not taught. I kind of just saw that happening in my parents and in my family, and I just kind of started naturally doing it. And so it wasn't as regimented as that, which I like that model, and I've heard that system before of the jars and the different things you put stuff in.
That's great.
And when you're little, it's like, I hate this, but it teaches you a lot. I mean, clearly you're doing it with your kids, right? I mean, there's a reason for that.
Well, we're doing they have to set money aside for the church, not
right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
At some
same
point,
principle, right?
At some point we need to get like they have like a little, I think they all have a little savings bank or something in their room. Like, they put money in.
Your dad was preparing you for taxes too. Like, like you don't have very much left. So that's the way it is.
Welcome to life, son.
Welcome to life. Yeah. Do you feel like, so your parents were frugal too? Like his?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So mine were too. Do you feel like that has rubbed off on you a lot, or do you feel like you're a lot different from?
Interesting.
I think that's kind of hard to answer, like, because just, I don't know, everybody's expenses are so different now too. Like, I don't know, what they were bringing in versus what, they were able to save.
Yeah.
And so the perception may have been that they were saving a lot, or they just didn't have much.
Like,
but
I think, like, do you think you buy things more quickly than your parents did when you were the age of, your kids?
I would say, I wouldn't say that this case. I would probably say, we don't, outside of necessities, we're not really frivolous, like, other than we like driving nicer cars,
right.
I should say,
right.
a Kia and a Honda. But like,
yeah, but newer.
Yeah, but like my
cars
parents never did that. Like, it was always, their mentality was like, it's always going to be a used car and we're going to keep it for 8 years. Right. Like, my dad's had the same pickup truck for, I don't know, probably 10 years now.
And it's not because he couldn't afford something.
Oh, no, he could go get whatever he wants, but like, it's just, I don't know, it's just not something that he, I guess, is like, it's something that interests me, like, I like cars. Right. So that's just one of my things, but
right.
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard that's a hard question.
Do you think you're a lot different, Mitch, than your parents in spending?
I don't think a lot different. But I do think my wife Lexi and I both have, especially when we first got married and expenses were very low and we were living in an apartment and making our full-time salaries for the first time, we've had moments of like, oh, growing up, we could never just go do this. So then we just go do it. And so occasionally we'll have that. But the older we get, and now family of 3 and a house and all those things, we're realizing how similar we are to how we were raised, I guess. But I mean, we still have times where it's like, oh, we don't feel like cooking tonight. And that was like never an option when my family growing up. It was just like, no, you get a home cooked meal, which is awesome.
That's culturally different now.
But
too,
I think that has changed.
Well, there is that too. There's everything that's come out
your
about.
Your parents also had 6 children.
Right.
Right. So when you have one, it's one thing. You're not, and she's not eating a kid's meal yet.
Right.
Right. But then when you get to, it's expensive to go out to eat. But yeah, you're right. Culturally, I think.
Yeah, we do a lot more, just like in general. And I don't know. I mean, if you sit down and like do the math on, like, sometimes it's cheaper to go get something out, like, depending on how many people there are in your family and everything. Because like for us, with
the cost of groceries has gone up a lot, and you look at all the ingredients it takes to put a whole meal together. Sometimes, yes,
yeah,
depending on how many people,
and depending on if your significant other likes to buy all organic and non-GMO, and like that kind of, it makes it even more expensive. But like when I take our family to Chick-fil-A, it's like $50 easy.
Yeah,
and that's if everybody's getting just
you
like
could have
water.
eaten at home for 20.
Yeah, sandwiches would be less than that, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, there's always peanut butter and jelly. Yeah, right. But
I mean, it's more culturally acceptable, I think, now to eat.
It was a treat when I was a kid, like to go out to eat. Our kids have gotten to where like it's not.
Yeah, we're at least once a week somewhere.
At least, right? Yeah, at least.
And that's a huge part of our monthly budget is, I mean, eating outside the house.
Right. Yeah.
Inside the house is still a huge part of our monthly budget, but like, yeah.
So one of the things I think that we get trapped in and we talk about a lot in this world today, and it's hard to define, I think, is materialism. And when are we being materialistic, and when is it okay? And like we all, we know, we've talked about this in conversation many a time about how in America we're all rich compared to the rest of the world for the most part, no matter what income level the 3 of us are at or anybody listening. How do we determine if it's okay or not? Like, do you have this inner like guilt if you like, I think maybe we were materialistic here, maybe we shouldn't spend on this, maybe we should have been more generous for this? Is that a struggle, or do you feel like it's easy? That's like no problem for you. You got that figured out.
I mean, that's a bold thing to say you have it figured out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always come back to the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And I think that's for me when it becomes materialistic and becomes this thing that maybe you can feel a level of guilt about, is when it becomes like, oh, I love spending money, or it consumes me. I've got to look like this. I've got to act like this. I've got to drive this car. I've got to do this. And then that becomes the motivation. Then I think that's where, for me, it gets like, all right, we should probably evaluate really why we're doing this, or if we need to do this right now. Because I can be a person who is relatively impulsive when it comes to some of these kinds of things, to where it's like, oh, let's just do it. Who cares? Like, can't take it with you when you die, so let's just do it. But there's a piece of that to where if that becomes just like how you operate, and it is really like the love of just having stuff for the sake of looking like you have stuff or whatever, then I think that's where it becomes maybe more of a sin and a heart issue. But I don't know what you guys think, but
I don't know. I'm wrestling with that in my heart right now. I feel like if it comes down to like having to start taking things away from you, and how like from me, like how married I am to those objects or that material, whatever it may be, if depending on how difficult that is, outside of the necessities of life, then I feel like that's how you measure how materialistic you are.
That's a good point.
But like, as I'm thinking in my life, like right now, like, I mean, there's nothing material necessarily that we're like chasing after, that we're like, oh man, we really have to have this, or we can't get rid of this.
If you had to have lesser cars, for example, right now, you would do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, I mean, and we make room in our finances for the things that we love and that we enjoy, and so that's a good question. I don't know how to answer that. Like,
do you think do you find yourself judging other people, like ever, like looking like, they're spending way too much on that. They should probably not go there, not do that. not spend so much. They're so materialistic. Does that ever enter your mind? No,
I for one do not.
Do not.
Yeah, I don't really either. I mean, I don't know. Occasionally, well, we all have those times where like, oh man, they could be making better choices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right, I
everybody,
guess, yeah.
like
Right.
everybody sees those people. But like if you have like if there's somebody in our church that they're committed believer, they're walking with the Lord. We're pretty sure they're tithing and they're giving, like, and then they have a side project that they're frivolous with. I mean, it's, I would just assume that's their hobby and that's what they enjoy doing. I don't really, I think it's tough for us in our demographic with people that we live around. Like we look around and we're like, hey, everybody looks like they're well off, and it's not like many people are struggling. But I think when people are struggling and that they're struggling, that's when you can kind of maybe be like, oh, maybe they shouldn't have done that, or they maybe shouldn't have bought that car.
Yeah, I think generationally too, it's changed. Like a few times around here, we've been like doing a project and there's stuff, and here's me, like, you guys are ready to throw stuff away. We're not using it anymore.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I'm like, but somebody could use it somewhere. Somebody could sell it on Marketplace.
Until we need
Store
it.
it until we need it again. And do you think that's a generational thing, or you think that's just the way I was raised? Because I know, I think we've transitioned, you guys too, being younger, to more about, it's about having a good life experience than it is about stuff. And I know for Shay and I, we talk about it more like there's nothing we need materially. What we want to do is have good experiences, like in life, like have memorable vacations. It doesn't have to be expensive to be memorable, but things that, like going and doing things together as a family just with each other, extended family. And those things are more like the type of gifts we want to buy and get for our family more than material things. Cause like, what do our kids need? There's not that much. And,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know that it's a generational thing really, but because like I even know people now that would be like in my generation that would be like, oh, I'm never getting rid of that. We might use it again. Like I even have that mentality with some things. And I know like minimalism is kind of like a trend that comes and goes, right? Like and a lot of that comes down to just not wanting to feel cluttered, right? And you want your life to feel a little bit simpler.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times around the office where you're like, no, don't throw that away. Go stash it somewhere. And I'll be like, okay, but if I stash it somewhere, nobody's going to touch it for the next 10 years until I'm the one that throws it away.
Right.
So it's just, and sometimes that's a mentality thing that comes with not wanting to be wasteful. Right. And I think that's where you come from. Like somebody could use that, or, somebody might be mad that you threw that away because of, we paid money for it. But like in reality, who? And who's going to take it if not? Think about some, just some old office furniture we've been dealing with the past couple months. Like, yeah, I can stick it out in the garage or in a closet, but it's going to stay there.
My grandmother, Markle, my dad's mom, she would take the bags that the bread came in and wash them out, put them on a clothesline, and use them to put, sandwiches in the next day for the kids to take to school. I mean, and they didn't have what, as much then. And it was coming out of that period of the Depression and everything like that. So people were more conservative in general, but that's the mindset that my dad grew up with. So, some of that gets transferred. And
is that a lack of not wanting to throw something like that out that could be valuable? Or is that just like a mindset? That's not like, oh, we don't have money to buy another bag of bread. It's more like this could be useful. And it, like in that time,
it was
like,
a time period. Like they would have, I remember eating at the table with them when I was a kid, and they would have a jar of homemade jelly, one of those mason jars, and it was empty. Looked like it. No, it wasn't. My grandfather would tear up a piece of bread, put it in the jar, swish it all around in the jar to get every ounce of jelly out of that jar before they, would wash that jar out to make more jelly. And that's not like the way we think. If we can't squeeze any more out of our squeezed jelly, toss it in the trash can.
Grab the new one.
Grab the new one.
Yeah.
So there's a different mindset today. But I say all that to say, I think one of the issues I think would be good to talk about too is this, we have a marriage retreat this weekend. One of the things that Christy said in talking about that was how that, I think she said it in there, but that money is still like the number one reason that couples fight. And so you guys are married just like I am, and we both, Sherry and I, brought different concepts of money into marriage, and that caused some issues early on. And so we work through those. We understand that more now, but the mindset definitely different. Do you guys have any insight on that? Like, one of you more in charge of the money, or you do it together? Is one of you kind of like the spreadsheet person or the numbers person?
Go ahead, Mitch.
My wife is more of that, just because
The manager?
yeah, she's more analytical thinking and more administrative in that way. So for her, it's like it's more natural for her to look at some of that stuff and manage more of it than it is for me. But in terms of like philosophy of money, like we're pretty similar. Like when we got married, she had more than me, but we both had a lot of money that we had in savings in high school, and we kind of just like threw it together, and we're like, oh wow, we're pretty well off and pretty similar on how we handle a lot of this stuff. There's definitely been adjustments for sure, because it's two different people coming together and managing money. So there's definitely been times of like, I would say I'm probably more so a spender than she is. So there's been times of like me being like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I don't need this, or I guess we don't need this right now. And just kind of like learning that over the 3+ years we've been married. But it's been, I don't think we've ever really fought about money or had big like disagreements, or like, man, we're just couldn't view this more differently. Like that's never really been a struggle for us.
That's good.
But I know that that's not the case for everybody. I think we're lucky in that way, to where it's just.
I think you are fortunate, and you probably in your premarital counseling when you did that, was there a whole section on money where you guys discussed that? That's helpful. It's so critical. Like I always try to make sure that we talk about that with couples that are getting married. What about you and Lisa Kay?
Yeah, we're very similar in that we both came from kind of like frugal-minded parents and families, but we both operate so differently, like the way that we think about money. And we're so blessed with, in our family, there's not, like you were saying, there's nothing that we need. We don't need, we just get what we need. That's a huge blessing. But whenever it comes to like the extra stuff, I just get it. I'll just buy it. And Lisa Kay will wrestle with it. She'll be like, and sometimes she'll bring something up and like wait on validity to like, she'll be like, yeah, this is on Amazon for $8. I, really would be not. And like back in my mind, I was like, just get it. Yeah. Or like, are you waiting on me to be like, that's okay, you can do it. So like we have different mentalities.
That's
in
how
that.
we are.
But that's not, I feel like that's just who we are.
Do you have agreed upon like, I'm not going to spend more than X amount without talking to you first? It's kind of like understood. And like, you're not going to go out and spend a big amount of money without talking about it.
I don't think I really spend anything frivolously without talking.
Right.
Without
any frivolous
some
things.
kind of conversation of, hey, I want this, or hey, can we do this, or whatever. Like, I don't think I've ever just been like, hey, did you see the bank statement? Like, I bought that. Like, I don't think I've ever done that in the years that 3 years we've been married. But
yeah,
I think it evolves as you get married. It depends on.
Do y'all do that? Do you have a limit that you have to get a
no,
spousal
not a
approval
limit,
for?
but with no weird, crazy amounts without talking about it first. Like, and I do most of our finances. I enjoy numbers. I was gonna go into that if I got ahead and called me to ministry. My dad was an accountant, so I enjoy keeping track of all that. And Sherry's happy for me to do that, but I send her updates. I send her the sheet to look at, and she could do it all if I didn't. She's fully capable of it. But we, sometimes I'll be like, what was, like, there'll be some weird charge. I'll be like, what is that? I mean, because I said I need to categorize it, and some of it is like, okay, that makes sense.
So if you were to drop dead right now, how screwed would Sherry be with like your financial situation? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to pay the mortgage.
No, she would have all the passwords. There's a sheet with everything.
But there'd still be a big learning curve, I'm assuming. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, learning on how I did it. Like that's the thing. Like, I know I've talked to other widows who their husband did it and then they passed, and then the way he did it was complicated compared, and it doesn't have to be. So everybody has to find their way to manage it. But the whole idea, I mean, of this whole thing is that we're talking about God blesses us with different amounts of money, and the whole idea of materialism, it's about we're not owning anything. We're just managing what God's blessed us with. And if we keep our mindset right, then we are good at managing it, I believe. And that's in the church world, when we talk about it, it's so often like, okay, the reason the church talks about it is because the church wants more people to give more. Sure. But the whole idea is like, if people really understand all the principles that are in the Bible about money, everything that is in there, they will have money to give, and they'll want to, and they realize that they're investing in eternity. So giving, what do you guys think? Like, what is the biggest hang up for people that you guys think, just off the top of your head, that the misconceptions or the excuses you hear from people?
Yeah, we had this conversation last week.
We did.
And just there's a lot of them. I think there's a lot of confusion in society about why the church exists in the first place. Is it just to take people's money? Because that's what it looks like to a lot of people on the outside that see the church building these huge buildings with, multi-million-dollar AV budgets, and they're like, the last thing that I need to be doing with my money in this economy is giving it to the church so they can, buy more camera equipment. You know what I'm saying? So like that is, I think, a big part of the problem, is just misconceptions about what we do with our money as a church.
Can a church be materialistic?
100%.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So 100%. Who judges that?
Everybody.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be the big one. Just mistrust, I think, too. Like you see some of the well-known TV megachurch pastors that, have $15 million mansions, and some have private jets. And then people just think that that kind of like trickles down, and everybody's like that,
Right.
So which is not the case at all. But those kind of people and those kind of pastors and those kind of churches, they cast an unfortunate shadow on the rest of the churches and the world, really. And and as a result, people don't trust the church. So
yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. And then I think maybe the other side that, people are either maybe on one side or the other, is just a lack of education on biblical principles, maybe a lack of discipleship on money and how to steward money. I think, maybe if there are people maybe in congregations all over the world that trust the church and are like, yeah, I know the church is for good, or my church is for good, and they're like, yeah, I'm here every week, I'm faithful, whatever. But then that missing step is, I don't know why I would give. Or like we've talked about before, it seems like everything's going well and it seems like they've got everything they need. So why would I play a part in this? Or, why would I give to this? Maybe I'll just show up and maybe I'll just, say everything was good and that's my form of giving. But there's no like, step of like teaching people how to sacrifice and how to give, and doing that well and teaching that biblically, I think, hasn't been done across the board very well, because it's either there's churches that just hammer you about money, or there's churches that are like, let's attach it to this version of the gospel where if you give, then you get everything you want, right? And that middle ground maybe is a good place to be, but I don't know how often that gets communicated well to the common person who comes to church every week, and I think that's a big issue in my opinion.
And that's what we're going to try to do in this series, but it is challenging. I think people have their ideas when they come in, and I do believe that we're fighting against that. And when you work for a church, there's always like that feeling too of like the pastor fishbowl type of thing, of like people are gonna watch what you do with your money, right? There's that sense of like, I got to be a good example. I don't want to look materialistic, but I also want to fit into the somewhat of the culture that we're living in. But you've mentioned, like there's that extreme of poverty of theology. Poverty is like being closer to God by having as little as possible, or prosperity theology being God's going to bless me because I give, and he's going to give me so much more, and I'm going to get richer and richer. And that's what God does. And those are just bad ideas, but people definitely struggle with that. And it's always this delicate topic when you talk about it, when you get more forceful. So the question I was thinking is it for you guys, is generosity a habit, obligation, or do you look at it as, man, this is so cool, I get to invest in the church? Like,
I think that there's a little bit of all of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think habitually, it's the first thing that we think about when we get our paychecks on Fridays. It's like, well, it's time to send our tithe. And then also there's like you said obligation. I feel like, we feel like, it as, members of a church, as Christians, like it is like this, it's what God's called us to do. Like we're obligated to do this. Like like God has clearly instructed us to be responsible with our money and give back to Him what He's first given to us. And so that piece of obligation, I feel like is huge. And I would be lying if I didn't say every once in a while we're like, oh man, like it'd be nice if we didn't give that to the church. Like we could have bought this way, or we could have made an extra payment on something, or like there are those times. I mean, that's our human nature, coming into play. But yeah, I think that all of the above with that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and I think like I like the point of obligation. I think that's been maybe communicated very negatively, but I think there actually is some things that, especially in the Christian walk and Christian life, that you are obligated to do, and that's not a bad thing. That's kind of, I like maybe the word mandate. Like if you're adopted into the family of God, there's things that are asked of you and mandated of you as to call yourself a Christ follower, right? And that doesn't have to be bad or negative. It's more of like training yourself in spiritual development, getting to a point where that's like, yeah, it's an obligation, but I'm privileged to be able to do it because of what God has done for me, right? It's kind of working that out. And I think giving and generosity is one of those things where it's like, maybe if you first hear it, you're like, why? Like, I'm obligated to give to the church? Like, why would anybody ever do that? But then the more that you are developed into who, Jesus has called you to be and the fullness of, what God wants us to do here on earth, then you're like, yeah, it's an obligation. Like, there's times when I'm like, I don't feel like doing this, but I'm going to do it because look at what God's done for me. I can give. I can be generous too, right?
Well, yeah, and I think that's what our hope is for people, is that it becomes a heart thing. I think it is a heart thing. And Jesus said, where your treasures are, your heart will be also. So I think the heart is, I don't want people to make the initial decision to become a generous giver. I want that to be a heart thing, but then it becomes a habit thing, because I know there are times like you guys just shared, look at the giving that we've done. We could have paid this off. We could have done this for the house, or we could have whatever. And then it's like, but I'm glad I made it a habit. Because if I made the decision every week or every month, I'm see if I have anything left, and then I'll give it, it wouldn't be good. Because there's always other things to do with our money. And so I don't think a lot of people that struggle with this because you don't plan to be generous. You just don't. And it's just like, well, everything will get done. Somebody else take care of it. And I think there's all these different things that come into our minds about it and make it hard. But I think the whole idea, it's easy. We are guys of habit here. We've made it a habit in our lives to give, and we believe what the Bible teaches about it. But I don't know, do you guys think about it as the investment part very often, or you just think about this as something I need to do?
I think about all the time.
Yeah.
And we're in a unique situation because we work here at the church, and we manage budgets, the overall budget, and we are responsible for spending and allocating the money that people give. So like whenever we have to buy something, like a lot of times we're like, is that the cheapest website we could have got that from? Or like, is there a better price that we can negotiate? Or, like it makes us more, in tune to like where every dollar is actually going. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we know the sacrifice that we make in order to give to the church. And we want everybody's contributions to be, go to the right place. And so I think I feel like there's a definitely extra buy-in because we know that it is an investment. And not only that, but I think too, like I said, we're in a unique situation here at the church. So we see all the extra struggles that our budget sees, with inflation and with rising costs here and there and all the extra emergency things that we have to spend money on, like, roofs and air conditioning units and those kind of things that those that come in and aren't, habitually tithing, that might just give, $1 here, $1 there. They don't realize, I feel like a lot of times that, there are $100,000 roof
repairs that we need to do.
And so we see those things, and I think that causes us to just have a little bit more buy-in, and I think the more you're involved in the church, the more you see the inner workings of the church, the more you volunteer, the more that you see those things as well.
Yep.
It was kind of prior to Mitch being on staff, but the Greater Campaign was the first time I was confronted with that. Like, I'm leading a church through a building campaign, and we're trying to raise $1 million up front to be able to do the renovation and the add-on. And I remember talking to my wife, like, okay, we tithe, but we got to give above that for this. We got to set the example. I can't get up there and say something I'm not doing. And we came up with the number. She was like, whew. I was like, I know, but you know what? We got to do it.
We're asking other people
to do it, to sacrifice. But I'm talking about investment. Every time, sometimes I just walk through our building and you're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm walking to the restroom in the front just to take a walk. But not every time, but a lot of times I walk through, I'm like, wow. I'm looking at these windows. I'm looking at the add-on to the building. I'm like, thank you, God. And we still have a mortgage and it's a lot, but thank you, God, we were able to do this and that we were able to be a part of it. And early on, I remember when I planted a church and just the whole thing about preaching and talking about this, I know God worked on my heart. Like, look, Steve, if you're going to get up there and talk about it, you better be doing it. And conviction, like, okay, we need to up the amount. We need to do more. We need to make sure that we're living out what we're saying. So there's always that fine line, but there's always that challenge. And, I know, like, even now, when you now have a daughter, Mitch, it's kind of like, okay, giving isn't like easy all the time because there's a lot of bills and everything that come up, but there's also, you're investing in her future, right? Like what I give helps to turn the lights on in that next gen hallway and helps to provide for the nursery program and all that. And
you're also teaching money management to them too, right? Like, indirectly. Because when we tell our kids to give their, 10 cents out of their dollar, that they earn for, taking the trash out or whatever it is, and they, have a hard attitude about that, it's easy for us then to stand up and be like, hey, well, listen, every dollar that we give 10 cents as well. And just leading by example to them is big. But you're right. Being able to look and see all that they're doing in the kids ministry and know that they're, being well taken care of because of what everybody gives is huge.
Yeah.
Yep. Any other thoughts?
No, I'm excited because usually these kind of series give fresh perspective to a lot of people, and they challenge people in ways that they don't expect to be challenged. But also too, like, this series isn't really about giving money to the church, or about tithing. It's about the investment that you're making, right? That's the whole title, but also just overall, advice and guidelines and instruction. So
right, it's like Mitch was talking about earlier, like the basic instruction from the Bible about finances. There's so much, and people don't know it, and that's why a lot of people they're not generous, not out of greed, but out of ignorance, right? And so we want to help people that are struggling with not knowing, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that, or I should do that. Everything, okay, I can do that. It's a little bit challenging, but I can do that. So I think it's making people aware. It's education. I felt like as I went over this week's sermon already, it's like, okay, this is not as preachy as it is teachy.
Instruction, yeah.
It's teaching them instructions and being very practical. This is so practical. So nobody can say, I don't relate to money, because I think we think about money every day. I think it's something that affects
every
us.
hour
of every day. I need more money, Lord. But it goes into all the way that we live and how we, decide whether we're going to lunch or not and where we're going to eat. It's all of choices constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're doing, announcing it Sunday, or for, I guess when you're listening to this, you probably already heard it announced, but Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace thing.
We're offering the class.
Yeah, we're offering it here
in March, starting sometime in March.
So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, oh man, these guys are nuts and I don't believe in anything they're saying, then maybe you should take this class and sign up for it and get some extra perspective, and it'll help give you practical ways, not just biblical ways, but practical, easy, tangible ways to help you manage your money.
Yeah, I took that course. Sherry and I did probably 15 years ago, and we didn't apply every single thing. Because Dave is, if anybody knows Dave Ramsey, he's maybe extreme on some things, but he's very wise, knows what he's talking about. It's all biblically based. So, but it definitely helped us in our relationship. So,
he can be a little over the top at times.
Yes,
but I feel like the whole point of the extreme nature that he takes and he wants people to take is because he needs 100% buy-in in order for it to work. And he caters to a lot of people that are like really struggling in their finances. If you've got, if you're doing well and you're saving money and your investment accounts are doing well, you don't have any debt. He's not really the kind of person that, is going to help you much. It's, if you feel underwater all the time and you're really struggling, that's the kind of people that he caters to, which, but the principles are awesome.
Yeah.
Like, don't have debt. Don't spend more money than
act
you
your
get.
wage.
Yeah,
don't spend more than you make. Yeah,
exactly. So hopefully that, the church as a whole is investing a little bit in that. So hopefully people can get some good advice in that class, and hopefully we get some good turnout.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe 10 plus couples is what we're aiming for.
Right.
In that.
Yep.
So if you're listening to this, go sign up. It's not too late.
Mm-hmm.
When does it start? March
11th.
March 11th.
On Monday night,
we're
going to offer childcare to go with it. So,
and you can sign up anytime till then.
It's already live. It's on our. Yeah, you can sign up anytime now. So, Yep. Very good.
So speaking of money, what's for lunch today?
It's almost that time.
It is.
Yeah. It will be.
A little bit.
And it will be soon.
All right.
Take us
out. That's all we have for today. This is kind of a precursor conversation, just some of our own personal thoughts on this. But if you're watching this as it comes out, then we'd love for you to be here over the next couple weeks as we continue in our series called Return on Investment. And if you're watching this sometime in the future, then you can always go back and watch those messages and just kind of get into the world of generosity and how to better manage your money, because God has a lot to say about stewardship, not just money, but just in general. A lot of what we're called to do post accepting Jesus and then living a life for him, it is the word stewardship. It's how you manage what God has given you. So these principles are important. So I think that's it for today. Let us know, as always, what you thought and what you would like to hear us talk about, because we'll talk about pretty much anything, but we want to talk about things that matter. So let us know what that should be. You can email podcast@sycamorecreek.org. You can just leave it in the comments. You can message any one of us. You can message Sycamore Creek social media. However you get in contact with us, let us know what you want the rest of Season 6 to be. And we will see you next week on the In All Things podcast. Goodbye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the In All Things podcast. Our challenge for you today is to send this episode to one person. Seriously, think of somebody right now that could use this conversation and send it to them. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic ideas, please send them to podcast@sycamorecreek.org, and make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Sycamore Creek Church so that you can always see what's going on in our world. If this conversation helped you at all, make sure you share it, leave a review, and subscribe so that you don't miss out on a single episode. We love you, God loves you, and we'll see you next week on the In All Things podcast.